The title of this video, a single human operative made the entire fleet retreat. In a future where humanity teeters on the brink of extinction, a powerful alien fleet descends to finish the war. Earth deploys a final desperate measure. Vanguard, a lone operative forged through forbidden technology and psychological warfare. Sent into the heart of the enemy's advance, Vanguard becomes more than a soldier. He becomes a myth. With no army, no weapons, and only fears his tool, he forces an entire alien fleet to retreat. But as the enemy flees, Vanguard must face the shattered fragments of his own identity and decide whether he is still human or something far beyond it. Ask ChatGPT. The stars had stopped singing. From the command bridge of Earth's last orbital defense bastion, Admiral Vora stared at the swirling void, her fingers locked behind her back. The Thalkesh fleet loomed beyond the shattered arc of the Jovian colonies, a mass of angular leviathans that defied human engineering. They moved in absolute silence, an armada the size of a small moon, their glowing propulsion trails barely visible against the black. 13 colonies had already fallen. Earth stood alone now, not because it was defensible, but because there was nothing left to fall behind it. The air around her was heavy with the unspoken. Every officer on deck knew what was coming. Status, Vora asked. Thalkesh fleet entering strike formation. 72 vessels confirmed. Her tactical officer replied, ETA to lunar perimeter, 18 hours. There was no outmaneuvering this, no negotiating. The aliens didn't want territory. They wanted silence. Total, perfect silence. Of resistance, of culture, of thought. They had eradicated planets for less than what Earth had done. Survive. She turned slowly. Activate Obsidian Protocol. There was a pause. Eyes widened, breath held. Someone whispered, Ma'am, that's a death order. No, Vora said, her voice steel and dust. It's a delay order. Buy us time. Even one day. A cold, surgical hum filled the launch chamber. He sat still in the harness, eyes closed, armor whispering softly as it adjusted to his biosignature. Code name Vanguard. The operative had once been human. Born Julian Wren, a Marine with more confirmed kills and missions. But years under Project Eidolon had left little of him untouched. His nervous system had been rewritten, his memory fragmented by deliberate trauma loops. He no longer dreamed, no longer wept. His mind had been made into a weapon sharp enough to cut through reality itself. A medic approached, injecting stabilizers into his neck. Sir, do you remember the brief? I remember enough, Vanguard replied, voice quiet but saturated with an unnatural calm. His eyes opened, blue, glowing faintly. Not human. Not anymore. The Karen relay is your drop point. The aliens are regrouping there. They've taken the old station. Then I'll take it back. You're not meant to hold it, the tech reminded him. You're meant to be seen. That's all. Let them look at you and run. The pod doors closed with a hiss. Through the slit of reinforced glass, Earth drifted below, distant and fragile. He whispered to it, or to himself, one last time. Then he was gone, a streak of synthetic fire hurtling into the dark. The Karen system bled static. It had once hosted a relay hub, an obsolete orbital station where deep space signals were filtered and parsed. Now, the station floated derelict, its arms torn open like a corpse gutted and left to freeze. Scorch marks painted its hull. Strange alien scaffolding encased portions of it, pulsing with vermilion energy. The Thalkesh had claimed it not for strategic value, but as a message. We are here, and there is nothing you can hide from us. A tear opened in the void. The pod shimmered into real space, invisible to standard sensors. Vanguard attached mid-drift, using impulse thrusters to push toward the station's belly. No alarm sounded. The enemy assumed their supremacy unchallenged. He breached a cracked maintenance hatch and slid in, silence embracing him like an old friend. Inside, the station was colder than he remembered. He passed floating debris, frozen droplets of old blood, and a shattered helmet still smeared with panic. He stepped through what had once been the communications deck, now a nest of alien tendrils and biometal cables that twitched softly at his presence. No resistance. Not yet. Vanguard reached the control core. The console flickered, under his touch. Earth's encrypted protocols still slept within, buried beneath alien interference. He pressed 2 fingers to the panel and thought, and the system responded, not with code, but with fear. A psychic waveform rippled outward, cloaked but potent, an ancient signal encoded with something far older than any human programming. The Thalkesh would feel it. They would not understand it, but they would feel it, and they would come. Far beyond the gas giant's shadow, within the command chamber of the Thalkesh dreadnought Exopriad, 100 neural-synced minds shuddered in unison. Commander Dreyar's 6 eyes narrowed. "A signal," he hissed. "Not a transmission," the sensor mind replied. "An echo, one from your nightmares." Dreyar stood. "Investigate. Now." From his perch atop the shattered deck, Vanguard waited. He had no reinforcements, no artillery, no escape plan, only the silence and the storm it invited. He watched as the first alien ship crept into view, sleek, barbed, and alive with motion. It circled the ruined station cautiously, scanning. Then, a landing pod detached. 3 spider-limbed Thalkesh warriors spilled out, armed, cautious. He didn't move, didn't breathe. As they approached, he activated the hallucination loop. Not a weapon, an experience. Something crafted from fragments of their own mythology, harvested during prior engagements. A glimpse of the being they were programmed to dread. The silent flame. A figure clad in entropy, who spoke only in death. The aliens halted. Their weapons trembled. One turned to flee, screamed, and his heart stopped without cause. Another tried to fire, but his limbs failed. The third simply dropped to his knees and wept without knowing why. Vanguard walked through them. Not hurried, not triumphant, just inevitable. He broadcast a single signal burst, an invitation. One that bypassed data, language, and logic. Something meant for instinct and fear. Then he looked up at the dozens of shapes blinking into orbit. The rest of the fleet was arriving. "Good," he murmured. "Let them come." You said. Darkness rippled to the Thalkesh fleet, like a virus passed through thought. Aboard the Exopriad, the command nexus throbbed with bioluminescent veins, casting sickly red light across the chamber's chitin walls. Commander Dreyar stood at the center of a pulsating hemisphere, surrounded by writhing data tendrils that fed directly into his neural cluster. His breathing had become shallow, ragged. Something had entered the psychic perimeter of their fleet. Something that did not belong to the living or the dead. "Transmit neural purge protocols across all dread cores," he barked. His voice was layered with 3 harmonics, as was the Thalkesh custom, meant to enforce order across shared consciousness. "It resists," answered one of his bonded tacticians. "The waveform is recursive. Every effort to isolate it strengthens it. It knows us." Dreyar silenced him with a flick of his arm. He could feel the dread pulling inside him, crawling just beneath his exoskin. Alien though he was, Dreyar knew fear. His species had evolved through terror, using it, adapting it, never falling to it. But this was different. This was ancient. He turned toward the viewport. The Karen relay station hung like a corpse lit by starlight, a human relic, worthless, and yet something waited inside it. Dispatch the memory seeker unit. Clean sweep. I want that station scorched to silence. 6 raiding vessels peeled away from a fleet, descending toward the relay's broken arms. Inside, Vanguard sat cross-legged in the core chamber, motionless, surrounded by gently floating debris. Dead cables, shattered screens, flakes of alien resin. His mind drifted along the interface. He had awakened. His heartbeat had slowed beyond survivable thresholds for an unmodified human, but he was no longer bound by their limits. His thoughts stretched across the station like fingers, listening for the fleet's approach. And it was near. The first enemy entered without resistance. For limbs scaled, eyes flashing like black pearls. Vanguard didn't lift his head. He didn't need to. The creature stepped over the remnants of its own dead scouts, mandibles twitching. Human. It rasped, voice distorted by translation implants. Vanguard answered in their native speech, a growl crafted from layered consonants and inverted tones. "I am not what you expected." The alien hesitated. "You are alone." No, Vanguard said softly, rising to his feet. You brought everyone I need. He activated the projection array embedded in his neural crown. The room around him dissolved into a different place. Its gravity reversed, walls folded, color bleeding into impossible shades. The Falkesh saw themselves, rows of lifeless bodies, their command ships burning, their homeward a ruin swallowed in shadow. None of it had happened, and yet they remembered it as if it had. The invaders screamed, firing wildly at nothing. Vanguard moved through the gunfire, untouched, not dodging, unseen. The alien's weapon sputtered, hissed, and fell silent. With 2 fingers, Vanguard touched its armored temple. You fear extinction, he whispered, but fear is what makes you real. The Falkesh collapsed, brainstem shredded by its own terror loop. Across the fleet, command nodes blinked erratically. Thought chains failed. Orders looped. Joiar clutched his cranial spines in agony as whispers filled his ears. Human words, twisted, half-remembered from old wars, invading their psychic language. Something is inside us, cried a pilot mind, voice shrieking to the command nexus. Not code, not virus. Self. Joiar slammed his hand onto the dread core, grounding his perception. It is a trick, a weapon of illusion. Destroy the relay. But by then, 2 more ships had lost navigation. One fired on its neighbor, convinced it was compromised. The formation fractured. Back in the relay, Vanguard climbed the outer deck, exposed a vacuum, armored boots magnetized to the scorched hull. The stars above burned blue-white, cold and eternal. He stood in silence as the enemy vessels encircled him like vultures unsure of the corpse. They had stopped broadcasting commands. They were only watching now, and that was enough. He initiated the final loop. A pulse leapt from his suit, encoded through EM fields and quantum entanglement, delivered directly into the minds of the watchers. They saw not him, but something larger, something impossible. Human eyes glowing with stars not yet born, a voice that cracked moons, a shadow that had no source. Vanguard did not kill them. He reminded them of death. One by one, ships began to drift, engines offline, crews paralyzed. Muted wails echoed through alien hives. Joiar's flagship remained, circling slowly, its lights dimmed to defensive red. Inside, Joiar stared into his private sanctuary mirror and saw something that shouldn't have been there. Himself, age-broken, bleeding black ichor from his chest. No, he gasped. I am dominant. I am mind. I am... The reflection smiled. Outside, Vanguard turned his head slightly, eyes glowing, heart steady. He whispered, "Run." And in the next moment, the Exopriya did just that, banking hard, blinking into hyperspace, followed by the remainder of the surviving fleet. Not in retreat. In flight, above the empty station, the stars resumed their silence. Vanguard stood alone, not triumphant, not victorious, only present. The storm had come, and the storm had left. Ask ChatGPT. The silence lingered longer than it should have. Vanguard stood motionless atop the gutted relay station, armored fingers resting against a fractured rail. His visor dimmed, flickering between sensor modes, but there was nothing left to see. The Falkesh fleet had vanished beyond the event horizon of local space. Not a trace of energy signature remained. Only psychic residue, thick and trembling, like the aftermath of an old scream echoing across a cathedral long emptied of prayer. He whispered into his suit's comm link, though no one was listening. They're gone. There was no reply from Earth. No burst of static. No pulse of gratitude. The relay's transmission systems had burned out during the last pulse. Vanguard was alone again, not just physically, but metaphysically, untethered from the species he'd sworn to protect. He turned away from the stars, descending back into the ruined station. Footsteps rang through the corridors, deliberate, soft. His presence still triggered residual distortions in the air. Time stuttered faintly around him, gravity dipping like breath held too long. The Eidolon protocol was doing more than intended. Too many activations in too short a window. His neural loop was decaying. Inside the central chamber, The flickering hollow map displayed Earth in distant orbit, dim and far. His gloved hand hovered above it, as if trying to remember what it once meant. And then a whisper, not from the ship, not from the systems, from the corridor behind him. He turned, plasma blade igniting with a muted hiss. A Thalkesh stood there, alone, unarmed, smaller than the warriors he'd encountered. This one wore priest robes, not battleplate. Its mandibles quivered, but it did not step back. One hand raised slowly, palm out in the ancient gesture of surrender. I came after, it rasped in standard. Vanguard said nothing. His blade remained lit. I am Ilex, the priest continued. I was among the chorus minds when your signal reached us. They tore at themselves, not from pain, but from recognition. You shouldn't be here, Vanguard said. His voice was flat, but something behind his eyes flickered. Doubt, maybe. Ilex stepped forward. I do not serve the fleet. I serve memory. And you are written in it. Propaganda, he muttered, lowering the blade slightly. Your kind built myths around fear. You fear extinction so deeply, you turn it into religion. Ilex tilted her head. You don't understand, do you? You are not their fear. You are our proof. Vanguard didn't move. Of what? Of consequence. That something in the dark still watches us. She sat then, without invitation, on the cold metal floor. Her exoskin was cracked along her ribs, the faint scent of dried enzyme wounds clinging to her. I studied your war, she said softly, the one you barely survived. Do you remember what you were before they made you into this? He paused, then shook his head. I remember a name. Julian. Your people erased you to make something terrifying, she whispered. But they forgot to give you something to return to, so you became the thing that never stops walking. His chest rose slowly, painfully. You speak as if you pity me. Ilex lowered her eyes. I mourn you. For a long moment. There was only the hum of dying systems. Then Vanguard deactivated his blade. Sparks flickered and vanished into gloom. I didn't want this, he said at last. But I was good at it. They kept sending me where the light had already gone out. Ilex met his gaze, then stopped, walked no further. I don't know how. Her voice, soft and alien, barely reached him. Then I will show you. He turned away, fingers trembling as he touched the wall. Pain lanced through his skull, images flashing like broken mirrors. A woman's voice laughing. A battlefield soaked in white ash. The first time he looked at a mirror after the neural burn and saw nothing familiar left. Eidolon fragments, he muttered. My mind is deteriorating. It's trying to become whole again. Too late. No, Ilex said, not if you choose differently. Vanguard stepped away from the wall, but the memory didn't fade. It followed him like a ghost. The station trembled slightly as a distant solar flare rattled its orbit. Debris drifted past the shattered viewports. He looked out again, toward where the fleet had fled. Somewhere in the endless dark, they were still running. Not from weapons, not from numbers, from him. And he had let them. Maybe they won't come back, Ilex said, joining him at the glass. They will, Vanguard replied. But next time, they'll know we don't need an army. Ilex said nothing. In the reflection, she saw his eyes dimming, not from power loss, from memory returning. The station systems gave a final pulse, an emergency flare, barely strong enough to carry. It would reach Earth in hours. If they were listening. Vanguard looked at Ilex one last time. If I forget again, you won't, she said, because now you've seen yourself. His voice cracked, barely audible. Then maybe I'll stop running. Outside, the stars pulsed, unfeeling, ancient watching. The silence held. And somewhere beyond, the storm turned its gaze elsewhere. You said, the emergency flare reached Earth 32 hours later, limping through broken relays and silent satellites. By then, the High Command had already assumed the worst. The last known transmission from the Karen system had been incomplete, a burst of static wrapped around a single word, seen. Many thought it meant destruction. Others thought it meant salvation. Admiral Vora stood in the war room, arms folded tightly, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. The room buzzed with quiet tension as Vanguard telemetry reappeared, flickering but alive. "He's still transmitting," a comms officer whispered. "No," Vora said. "He's remembering." On the Karen relay station, time no longer moved in straight lines. It curled inward, slowed, like a dying breath held in vacuum. The lights had gone dim. Most systems were fried. And yet, Vanguard remained, silent, standing in the shadow of the viewports, watching the void where the enemy had vanished. Ilex was gone. No trace. No blood. No ship. Just a faint memory of her voice, and the echo of her final words. He had searched the station twice. Nothing. Had she been real? Or another ghost summoned by his fraying mind? But she had touched him, spoken to him, and something had changed. He removed his helmet for the first time in what felt like years. The cold bit into his skin, the air sharp with copper and ozone. He looked at his reflection in a fractured panel. Not the monster they had built, not the myth the Thalkesh had feared. Just a man, barely holding himself together. Behind his eyes, the storm had quieted. There was no longer a need to broadcast fear. The enemy had already rewritten their doctrine. Psychological warfare divisions would be born from this incident. Entire fleets reassigned, not to conquer Earth, but to never return near it. Vanguard had not destroyed them. He had made them afraid to try again. He stepped into the core chamber one last time. The projection array still hummed weakly, but its charge was spent. His armor, too, was nearing critical failure. There would be no escape pod, no rescue shuttle. But he hadn't come here to be saved. He had come to be seen. With a slow, deliberate motion, he inserted the last fragment of memory into the Eidolon core, something he had carried in his neural storage for years without ever opening. It played now, a silent hologram casting light against the dark. A woman, smiling, a name spoken softly. Julian. He knelt beside the projection, placing one hand against the ghost. "I remember," he whispered. "I remember who I was." And then, at last, he closed his eyes. Above Karen, sensors flared anew. A small Earth vessel blinked into orbit, marked with medical insignia and non-aggressive tags. Vora had sent it on her own authority, despite opposition from the Defense Council. She had gambled on one thing, that if Vanguard had survived, he wouldn't leave, because he never had. The ship docked with the station in silence. A team entered carefully, weapons drawn, unsure what they'd find. They found him seated, unarmed, armor cracked and offline. He opened his eyes when they approached. "You're late," he said, voice raw but steady. One of the medics stepped forward. "Sir, are you operational?" He looked around the wreckage, the silence, the broken ghosts of what had been. "No," he said, "but I'm still here." They lifted him to his feet, and this time he let them far across the stars, within the inner sanctum of the Thalkesh High Communion. The surviving fleet commander Joyar stood before the chorus of minds, surrounded by shadow. "Was it a weapon?" one voice asked. "No," Joyar replied. "Then what was it?" He hesitated. "A reminder." "Of what?" Joyar's gaze drifted to the stars. That even the smallest flame can make the void retreat. The chamber fell silent, and the Thalkesh rewrote their maps. Earth's skies were quiet when Vanguard returned. There was no parade, no ceremony. His existence remained classified, his deeds buried in data, encrypted far below the crust. But the threat had passed. For now, that was enough. He was offered retirement, a new identity, a life somewhere quiet. He chose a cottage on Mars. The air was thin, but the silence was clean. He watched the stars each night, wondering not if they would come back, but who he would be when they did. And when the wind howled across the dust, sometimes he thought he heard her voice, not warning him, welcoming him back. "You said